previous tenant stayed here, I think in total for maybe 7-8 years.
Right.
They rented it and then they bought it. With the housing association contract, they'll take the property for say 3 to 5 year period,
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have to worry about the individual tenants living there.
With a property like this,
Yeah.
if we will rent out, so quickly in a week, how much would you expect in terms of rent? So Jordan, so I'd like to know about this property. So this is a 2-bedroom end terrace.
Yeah.
What kind of investment strategy would be good for this property?
So a typical investment strategy for a property like this would be buy-to-let, aiming at young professionals or young families.
Right.
Just because of the easy access into Manchester, you've got the M60 motorway. You've also got Guide Bridge Station, so people can, use that as sort of commuting into the city centre.
Sure.
And also, with it being the end terrace, you've also got a little bit more space. So aiming at the young families, they've obviously got the rear yard, not so overlooked, front yard, whereas a lot of the sort of neighbouring properties across the street don't have front yard, don't have rear yard.
Yeah.
So obviously, with buy-to-let, you want to have low maintenance. You want to get someone in there who's going to treat the property like it's their own, not just sort of have high turnover. So typically, you're aiming for a property where a tenant might move in and they stay there 5-6 years, look after the place. You've not got a huge amount of work to do once you have a handover to a new tenant.
And then I understand the previous tenant has stayed here for quite a long time, right?
Yeah. So the previous tenant stayed here, I think in total for maybe 7-8 years.
Right.
They rented it and then they bought it. So they're now moving to something bigger.
Okay.
So obviously you can see it's been maintained and sort of looked after.
Right. So with like a property like this, if it were to go on the market to find a tenant to let out, how long would it normally take to find a tenant to fill this place?
In this current market, I'd probably say, could be filled in a week or so.
Okay. So it's that fast?
Yeah, really fast. Because there's so little supply and still huge demand for properties around Manchester.
Right.
So yeah, it should rent really well.
Okay. So Jordan, with a property like this, if we will rent out, so quickly in a week, how much would you expect in terms of rent? And with a family tenant, normally, how much can you charge?
Yeah. So pre-2019, obviously before COVID, maybe this would get 825, something like that. Obviously since COVID, huge demand, limited supply of properties, a lot more landlords selling properties, so less stock available on the market.
Right.
We'd probably say to market this at 895.
Okay.
At least then, you can work backwards. More likely, someone will probably take it at the 895 just because there's not too much available. They look at it, it's clean, they can move in straight away.
Right.
So yeah, just because of the low supply, rent prices are soaring at the minute.
Sure. And you also mentioned, besides a buy-to-let, we can also do probably a housing association contract?
Yeah, so with the housing association contract, they'll take the property for say 3 to 5 year period.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have to worry about the individual tenants living there. You would have a contract with the housing provider itself.
Okay.
So they would tenant it themselves, they would manage it, they would take care of the maintenance, the repairs, essentially turning it into a hands-off investment. So you've got a business operating in your property as opposed to a private tenant. The biggest benefit for it is obviously lower running costs, lower maintenance, and you've got that certainty that your income's guaranteed, as opposed to private tenants who may, anything can happen, jobs, this, that, costs come up, the rent sort of void periods, that sort of thing. So you take all that away with social. See, the downside to the social is with the mortgage, you may be looking at maybe a slightly higher interest rate. The typical high street banks may not approve of a social housing tenant, so you need more of a specialist lender.
Sure.
好多人咧問我咧就係咧HA 租俾政府嘅物業咧係點樣做按揭嘅？咁咧其實分兩類嘅嚇。如果你喺香港咧嘅住咧，同埋如果喺英國住咧嘅人咧係有少少唔一樣嘅。咁啊當然啦，如果你個物業係租俾 HA 咧，呢個係一個投資嘅物業啦。咁所以銀行嚟講咧，佢收嘅利息咧一般咧都會高啲。 同埋咧佢會睇呢個按揭咧就叫做specialist mortgage，咁係一個特別啲嘅產品，就同普通咧 Buy-to-let 嘅按揭產品咧係唔一樣嘅。咁咧最好咧就揾翻當地英國當地嘅 mortgage broker， 咁啊幫你揾翻一啲嘅當地嘅銀行啦，或者金融機構咧去做翻呢個嘅按揭嘅產品。咁啊佢銀行咧都會睇就係話你嗰個租約係幾長嘅，同政府包租政府嘅機構。咁啊通常嚟講咧，你個租約唔好超過7年。如果唔係咧，銀行咧就會覺得咧佢會嗰個風險比較高，因為咧佢收樓咧。如果你唔還款，佢要收樓咧，咁佢就會比較難。咁所以咧，銀行去睇咧，HA 嘅物業咧，喺佢哋角度嚟講咧，風險係會比普通 Buy-to-let 係較高嘅嚇。咁所以佢個利息咧，亦都會比普通 Buy-to-let 嘅 mortgage 嘅利息係會高。咁喺而家嚟計啦，Buy-to-let 嘅 mortgage 咧，大概可能係4.3到一個年利息咧，fix 可能2年咁樣。咁如果 HA 嚟嘅按揭咧，可能會去到6至到6.8或者7厘嘅。
50萬可以做啲乜嘢？原來可以已經買到英國你嘅第一個投資物業㗎啦。用50萬，如果你買股票嚟講咧，你一定係會心驚膽跳。但係喺英國，其實咧你已經可以開始打造到咧你嘅投資組合㗎啦。大家好，我係 Hubert 80後，一個專業英國物業投資者。我打造咗一個2小時嘅投資課程，同大家講解咧英國物業咧入邊一區係應該買，入邊一區咧係唔可以買嘅。咁同埋會講一啲咧英國買樓嘅陷阱。同埋你點樣可以咧用英國物業做你嘅工具，去創造一啲嘅被動收入？click 下面條 link 嚟我嘅免費分享會啦，唔好錯過啦！